Hi, I'm Amogh. I am a student at IIT Delhi apparently, and I'm here in my final year at Udayagiri Hostel. I've done electrical engineering, but I'm not sure if I'll do that later. And I'll be joining Bain and Company in August this year.
Okay, hi, I'm Ayush, and I'm from Chemical Engineering Department in my fourth year. I'll be joining McKinsey this summer.
Hi, this is Himanshu. I'm a final year undergrad in electrical engineering and I've got an offer from L.E.K Consulting in the placement season.
A typical consultant is a problem solver. So anyone could be any form of business or even any individual could come up to a consultant with his problem, and it's the job of the consultant to figure out, to identify the root cause of the problem and then develop relevant solution.
And they try to solve them using the sort of knowledge that they have. In that sense, they work as knowledge managers where they connect the problems with the knowledge. And they also sometimes get more access to the internal dynamic of the company than an individual position in the company being an outsider. And that is the best case value addition that consulting firms do. Of course, there are multiple reasons as to how if this is done or not in the real world, but this is what they state to be doing.
Why did you choose consulting?
The reason I chose consulting is, as I mentioned, the diversity in problem solving, right? So I realized that during my time here at IIT Delhi, I've tried to explore various avenues, and I don't want to fixate right now to a particular sector, so as to say. So I want to explore the breadth right now.
Okay, so there's a bit of background story there. So everybody has a point in their lives where the direction changes. For me, that was when I was not able to get an intern during the first few days of our intern season back in my third year. So that completely devastated me, and it in general changed the direction of my life. So at that point, I started exploring a few courses from the Department of Management Studies, and I chose to do a minor in the same. So that's what got me interested in consulting in the first place. And moreover, there was a general sense of direction from my parents that I should go ahead and do an MBA since I'm not interested in coding. So that's what pushed me towards consulting. And just a little more to add on here. After I did my intern at WorldCont, I realized that I wanted a job with more visual impact, and that's precisely what consulting offers. So there you go.
So the short answer is I didn't like coding, I didn't like HFTs, right? So I wanted to move beyond all of that. But so if I look at all the placement opportunities, the ones that fit best were consulting for my future goals. In the sense that I wanted to do something different. Didn't see myself ending up in tech, right? I probably saw myself as working for something on my own, or working for the government, or like some policy work, right? Or something in the intersection of humanities or public policy, and all of that didn't seem to be relevant from a tech perspective, and that's why I chose a field where I get to do other things.
Post which, yes, if I find something, which is of my type, which is of my interest, then I would want to explore that in depth. And of course, there are other superficial perks as well, say, more travel, exposure, and, the city life that actually consulting offers. But the primary reason is the breadth that it covers.
So, in your experience, what is the thing that helps you become get a better placement, or how should you make your CV? Is there a CG criteria?
In order to make it at consulting or to get the job, there are two aspects. First is to get shortlisted. So CV shortlisting is the first criteria, and the second bucket would be appearing at the interview, so cracking the interview, right? So when I'm talking about CV shortlisting, I think what the company is looking for is a well-rounded CV. You have to justify what you did in those 3.5 years here at IIT Delhi, right? So when we talk about 4 sections, that is academics, which is basically CGPA, scholastic achievements, internships, and ECAs and PORs, right? So I would say out of these 4 sections, you need to be exceptionally well in any of those 2, and the rest 2 could be above average.
For example, for me, it was my intern and my ECAs, which were in music, and as you said, case studies. So I think that's what got me my shortlists in a few day one companies.
So what you're trying to justify here is that in those 3.5 years here at IIT Delhi, you've had well-rounded exposure, and when it comes to a relative scale, you're better than your peers.
Is that if you're above 8 in consulting, you're safe. That it's fine. Then you don't have to worry that much. Of course, if you're above 9, that's a good CG, and that has different impacts, which I'll come to. but it's not a very hard criteria.
Okay, so companies usually don't mention any CG criteria, but there is an invisible barrier there, which is for tier 1 companies, it is above 8. In our year, I think it was above 8.5. And for tier 2 companies, it's anywhere from around 7.5 to 8.
I know a friend who didn't have a PR, but he had an internship in consulting, and that's what helped him cross the barrier, even if he was like not at a very high CGPA. But also that sort of dynamics changed in the online time, because almost nobody had less than 8 CGPA who wanted to go for consulting, because everybody got that 8 plus barrier. So that's why in our year you can't really go ahead and tell very easily what is a good criteria.
How was your interview experience?
Okay. So actually, what happens in consulting is that even when the buddy interacts with you, they judge you on all the parameters that they have been assigned to judge you on, and every interaction that you have with them and every line you speak is judged. So with L.E.K, what happened was that I had 2 interactions with the buddy there, and both of them were quite good. And I also had a talk with the partner who was telling me about the company itself, and and that I should join the firm. Unknown to this idea that I already had the offer, I went into the interview on 11:30 on day 1, and as soon as I entered the interview, we exchanged greetings, and the next statement from the interviewer was that we are offering you the job, and we want you here at our firm. And I was surprised at that, and I took the offer, and yeah, my placement season ended right then.
In the selection process, I think once you're shortlisted, your CV doesn't matter that much. Once you're shortlisted, what matters is the feedback from your buddies and how the interview goes.
Basic yet the most important part is to be confident and to be honest, right? I think whenever we're appearing at an interview, we try to, as students, we try to be oversmart or fake certain things which are maybe on our CV or maybe what the story that we're telling. And trust me, the guy on the other side is 10 years, 20 years elder to you. He has interviewed hundreds of applicants, so he can see through if your story is genuine, if your profile is genuine, or if it's not. So I think that is something which is a typical do. And when I'm saying don't, right, I think so. When you're talking about presenting yourself, I think there shouldn't be any sharp edges, right? Try to be slightly politically correct. Don't give extreme statements, extreme remarks, which might, which might be against the beliefs of the interviewer or the culture of the firm.
Right. So, how does the buddy system function in consulting? Like, what it is about?
All right. So, I think it's a pretty broad topic to cover because the buddy process differs from firm to firm. And but if I were to talk about broad points for the whole process, I think each firm typically allots you 2 buddies, a junior buddy and a senior buddy. So a junior buddy is there for day-to-day conversations, for you to understand the process in detail and reach out to him in case of any issues that arise. And he is the one who will be taking more cases with you, who will be spending more time with you. The senior buddy is more to understand the experience and the culture of the firm, because typically junior buddies are somewhat only a year or 2 years elder to you. They're new in the firm themselves, so they might not have much exposure and much knowledge to impart with respect to the firm culture and the future opportunities. So senior buddy's role is to help you understand what the firm is all about, what they're actually looking for, more of a elder mentor advice to you.
What were the challenges that you faced?
So through the buddy process and the interview, they evaluate. The primary mode of evaluation is the interviews, but the buddy process does bias the interviewers by telling who's the better candidates. And some candidates perform very exceptionally in the buddy process, and they are people who the companies try to go after to speak, like companies try to fight for in the actual interview process. Those kind of dynamics play out. And what are they looking for essentially are 2 things, right? They're looking for you to be a likable person, and they're looking for you to be a good case solver, right? They look at problem solving skills through this medium of a case interview. So that is a standard procedure through which consulting goes. I think the other people have talked about the entire thing. That is something that you have a lot of books over, you have a lot of videos over. That is a standard aspect that is very standardized that everybody can do. You have to form case groups, you have to start working on them, and you have to do case. And then once the buddy process starts, you do cases with buddies, you impress them, and then you do cases with other people who are not your buddies, You and so on, move your way up in the firm and get cases with other people and impress those people. But again, there's not an opportunity that's afforded to everybody, only the people who do well in the process. But the second aspect is also important, that is likability, right? Because consulting is a people's process, a people's job, right? In that sense, you have to appear to be a likable person. You have to be appear to be a person who can hold a conversation, who the other person would like to talk to, right? And that becomes especially important when you're talking to seniors in your firm. Like, as I think Ayush must have mentioned about junior buddies and senior buddies. So when you're talking to senior buddies, they'll be looking at all of those things about how you'll fit into the culture, how well are you to talk. So if you're able to hold a conversation and if you're able to keep them interested, that shows a sort of engagement that you can provide, and that is something that is always a benefit in the process.
So what happened with me was that one of the buddies pointed out that you should never use Hindi in an interview because it shows unprofessionalism. And that was one thing that I found very important, because I was candidly using Hindi in every case studies that I used to do with my friends. So that's one of an important pointer that I got. And apart from that, another thing is to observe the time limits. That's one thing that we inculcated in our case studies as well, because the interview time is limited really to 20 to 30 minutes, and you need to wrap up everything, including your introduction and solving the case in those 20 minutes.
Okay, so what in your opinion is the role of networking in this field? Like, मतलब interview से पहले भी, what is the amount of role networking का in this profile?
All right. So I think consulting in general is quite network heavy, if that is the correct terminology, because eventually you have to be a people's person. You have to solve problems for different clients, right? But if you were to talk about how much networking is important prior to the process, okay, of course, it does help if you know something beforehand. But I don't think people who don't have any network are at any point disadvantaged. So I think 4 months are enough. Once you start with the job semester, then once you're allocated the buddies, it's a pretty formal process. They are also receptive. But in the end, of course, networking is important. You'll have to reach out to your seniors. But if you don't have prior connections, that's not a roadblock. Reach out to them, and they're receptive.
Okay.
You're right. So I think networking in general helps because it lets you get an idea of what is expected, and you can cater yourself to that, right? Even if, let's say, only the day one matters, networking would help in getting that sort of idea in your head. But networking becomes extremely important because these consulting firms have a sort of list of who they want to prioritize on that day. And in that sense, which they call hot list, right, which a lot of people might have heard. So if you have that sort of a process where buddies are judging you, in that sense, everybody, there'll be a lot of people who will be asked for like how this person is doing. So if you're able to network with people and impress people, that is when they'll say that you're a good person, a good fit for the firm, and that is when you'll be prioritized in the firm. So in that sense, networking does play a role. Now this networking can take both forms. Either you can like have connections to begin with and start from that, but you can also build connections like during the process, which a lot of people do.
Do you think being associated with certain PORs or certain clubs like maybe Share or the Debating Society give you an advantage in placements?
I think the advantage is there's a soft advantage that's always there, right? Because when you have a process that prioritizes people, right, it's always going to be about, when you judge subjective qualities like likability, like case skills, a lot of them are subjective. So in that sense, you have to build a rapport with individuals. And there is a sort of bias that creeps in which cannot be avoided. But I think that sort of bias can be overcome. This is something that will be a factor of any industry that looks at your personality, right? If you know the people who are judging your personality, you will create a better impression.
In my first year, I was completely oblivious to such facts that I need to work towards a CV, and I only joined music because I did it in school, and I wanted to continue it here. I did not know that it would help me in the CV in later stages. But what I would say is that you should join any one club and try to focus your energy there, and rise through the ranks, get a good POR there. It could be either in a club or in your hostel as well. For example, you could become a house secretary, or you could go outside and fight the elections for the SAC GSECI. Those are the kind of people who get shortlists in these tier 1 consulting companies.
So, Yash, as I mentioned, I think all in all, they're looking for a well-rounded CV. So if we're talking about bottom-heavy CVs, then of course, then you have to stand out through your leadership skills. When I'm talking about PORs, yes, we do. I mean, even here at IT Delhi, we know that there are certain societies, certain clubs, or certain elected positions which hold more value than the others, right? So even the seniors who are shortlisting know that how much effort and grind, how much effort was put by the students in getting that, and effectively that effort counts. So I would say certain fest PORs are considered good, certain elected positions are considered good. I'm personally the house secretary of Vidyanchal Hostel, so I thought that okay, even that section seems decent enough to get shortlisted.
Okay, so one thing that I've noticed from my first year is that people who go into debating club have consulting on their mind before even they join it. So there's definitely a preference of debating society people for these companies, because the seniors from this club go to these consulting companies. So naturally, during the shortlists, the people from debating society are shortlisted. For me, it was an uphill battle, but the only thing that helped me here, I think, was my involvement in music and my intern.
Okay, so you're saying there is a bias towards the debating people.
Yeah, I do think there is a bias, at least for tier 1 companies. For tier 2 companies, I've heard rumors that there is some approach using seniors, but I'm not sure.
What were the challenges that you faced in your preparation for getting through the selection process?
All right. So I think if I were to categorize challenges into personal and professional, so professional challenges, what I faced were, say first, I was slightly hesitant in reaching out to seniors to understand about the whole process and to be confident about consulting, right? Because I wasn't, I didn't have personal connections with seniors who were already a part of the firm. But I think that was an issue at my end itself, because once I actually reached out to them, they were quite receptive, and eventually they did help me out.
Okay, so talking about the challenges here, what I realized was that my profile was not suited to consulting initially. What I had in my pocket was the intern at WorldCount and a few events that I did with Music Club, one of which was getting second position at Rendezvous. So these were the only two strong points with which I was playing in consulting. So I was very skeptical of getting a shortlist. So I did not prepare early on for consulting. I was focused more on coding since I had an intern in the same region, in the same sector. So after the shortlists came out, it was roughly 1 month before day one, and I started to look out for partners who I could do cases with. But I found it that I was already late and everybody had formed their own groups. So that's something that I would suggest, that you should form groups early on, because later people don't tend to spread out in terms of doing cases with everyone. Luckily for me, there was a person in my hostel who was going for an APM profile, and I used to do cases with him and a few others from different hostels that I met actually during the placement seasons only.
So I think the biggest challenge that I faced was that I didn't get a lot of shortlists. So initially I thought of focusing on consulting and PM because similar laga mujhe. And the fact was I only got Bain and Company ka shortlist, and I was expecting more because I thought I had a better CV. So I had to just end may take a lot more tests, and I decided to change my trajectory of consulting, and that did put on some stress as in hoga nahi hoga, because again till the shortlist I hadn't given any other tests, so I had let go of a lot of opportunities. But wait, that was a major challenge, and theek hai, over time I just did things and I had confidence ki I'll just try to make the most of those opportunities. And since a lot of other tests were left, some tests panned out well, and for eventually before the day one I had a decent amount of shortlist, and I was happy about that.
So the second issue that I actually faced was that I used to compare myself with my peers, and I think that is a big mistake. I think everyone should judge themselves from an absolute level, that how they're performing, because if you were good, they will take you. You shouldn't compete with your peers and understand, okay, this guy is doing these many cases, this guy has these many connections, or this guy is relatively better than you at doing cases, because at that point of time when you were appearing for the interview, you're the only candidate there. So the interviewer, the partner will only judge you on an absolute scale. So don't, all the relative competition is just noise in the system.
Okay, so what do you think made you stand out in the CV shortlisting process and as well as in the interview process, which helped you grab the job?
Right. So I think in my CV I had a great scholastic section. I had a 9+ CGPA. I was selected for foreign exchange, and I had semester merit awards, which are good scholastic points. I think my internship was good, but not exceptional because like I think I had a day one internship, but I don't know how well respected the brand was. And my second year internship was a startup, so I don't know how that is weighed. So I think my internship might have been above average or good in that section. And my ECAs were pretty good because I had a lot of debating achievements and also had worked with a lot of NGOs and had some sort of social skills. So I think that is something that should have worked in my favor. And I didn't have a lot of PORs, which is something that would have worked negatively for me. So I think that if my interns were weighed well, my CV was good. But then that depends on how well my interns were weighed, and I think that's why there was some shortlists that were dicey for me to begin with, and like not getting a lot of them did put an impact. But I think that is where my CV stood, and that is what worked for me in the CV. Coming to the interview, I think I just prepared well in the cases. Right, I had a lot of confidence in cases. I was doing cases from the beginning. I think our group was one of the first to start. I did a lot of cases and I built confidence in that process. I did cases with seniors, I did cases with friends. I think I was doing decently well, but again, I think my day one went well, and that's why I got the job.
So, what do you think are the ups and downs of being a consultant?
Right, so I have not been a consultant, but from what I hear, for me, the ups would be the opportunity to interact with a lot of different people to see how the world works, and then just like go ahead, travel, move around, live like a fun life in a sense. But I think the downs are just like the work hours and having to just be at the beck and call of the client and the managers and the sort of things that happen when you are in that sort of dynamic, right? As a consultant, you are at the beck and call of a client, you have to answer to a client and those sort of answerability. And the client is often not happy with consultants because like everybody wants to get their money's worth. So there are pressures that comes on consultants from what I've heard as second party sources. So those pressures are something that are problematic to begin.
Downside is, of course, I think it's pretty hectic. The hours are slightly off. I have heard that my buddies used to have 70 hours a week work, which is roughly 14 to 16 hours a day. So I think, yeah, it's a lot of, the work-life balance is slightly off.
For the ups, the exit opportunities are really well. You can go into almost any field, and it's relatively easier to enter middle management in the corporate world. Apart from that, I think the learning curve here is really steep, and you can learn almost 4 years worth in just 2 years of working as a consultant. As for downs, I think work-life balance is definitely one thing. But what I believe is that if someone is offering you 20 to 30 lakhs and good standards of living in a good place and offering you to work with great people to learn from, I think that's a doable trade-off for a work-life balance. And anyway, in your 20s, your aim should be to learn as much as you can, because once you outgrow these learning years, you don't have any more scope to do so.
Of consulting, what path do you plan on taking?
Right. So I think the traditional prospects are like exits into any sort of good managerial position or like an MBA, preferably a foreign MBA for most people. And recently there is the PVC industry or the startup industry that is gaining traction. I'm not sure what I want to do. It is a big decision for me that I have to take. That's one of the reasons why I've gone for, let's say, the consulting route, is to like make sure I can decide for the future. But I'm thinking more of either the MBA route or let's say something else, some masters that I would like. I think there are a lot of interdisciplinary masters that are coming up which might be interesting, which use managerial skills but also my past backgrounds, and those are something that I want to explore.
Do you have?
Okay, so I do plan on working with L.E.K for a few years, and eventually I will go for an MBA. I'm thinking of going for an MBA in India itself, because in the later stages of my life, I want to settle in the country itself.
Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years type question?
All right. So, when I talk about the future, I think right now I'm quite open to it. Of course, there are standard mainstream paths that a lot of consultants take. Okay, so maybe they take a direct exit to either a private equity or venture capital firm, or they start their own venture, or they join an early stage startup at a high position. Right, these are the possibilities of direct exits. Second possibility is that they apply for good B schools abroad for an MBA, or they stay in consulting. And so I think these are the three cases. I am still not sure what I really want to do. Initially, I was one of those people who thought that, okay, I would want to go for a good B school abroad. So I'm not, but at this point of time, I think I would want to explore other opportunities, maybe start something of my own, or see where life takes me.
Do you have any closing message for the juniors who might want to pursue consulting?
All right. So I think my message to people would be to start early, because there are two aspects, as I mentioned. One is getting your CV shortlisted, and second is preparing for the interview. See, preparing for the interview is a level playing field. It's going to take you 4 months. You can do it, but the harsh reality is that building CV takes lifetime, right? Till date, we're building our CV. So you will have to understand that what are the things which are more relevant to consulting, and push yourself in that direction so that you have a good CV. Second advice that I would give was to, be able to get rid of the noise, right? Don't get disheartened that, okay, these are the certain, these get benefits, and I mean, there are certain, don't just bust all the myths that we've talked about, and don't really be able to segregate the noise. And third, as I mentioned, just judge yourself on an absolute scale. Don't be relative. Don't talk to multiple candidates and understand what is going on.
That's the thing. If you want to pursue consultancy, the biggest problem with the process is it's that always continuing, right? So there's a 4-month long process that, especially once the bloody process starts, there's a lot of pressures that are put on you, right? Because there is everybody else is competing. There are buddy systems going on. You don't know how well you're doing. You don't know how well you're being evaluated. But eventually, all of that doesn't matter. What matters is what's on your hand. So you need to contact your buddies. First of all, you need to build your casing skills. You need to contact your buddies, do good cases with them, have conversations with them, and show your interest, and try to contact, and then ask them about if you can contact other people in the firm. Try to contact as many people in the firm that you shortlisted, and try to make a good rapport with them, and then try to understand how the process is going without actually trying to be like a little desperate or anything. Like, some people start asking direct questions which might not seem very appropriate, but like, I think the idea is majorly that what you need to do is you need to do well, and you need to create, and you need to show that you're doing well to the people. But even if you don't do that, I think what's most important is that you are prepared for day one, that you're confident on day one, and you do that. Because eventually, the people who make their buddies, the people who make the hot list, are people who are just 1-2 years senior, right? So the partners know how don't necessarily trust their judgment 100%. There are people who are very high up in the hot list who don't get selected. So day one does matter. It's just that when you're in a hot list, you get multiple chances. But if you're doing well, and if you have that confidence on day one, that is what matters the most. So what you need to do is just be confident on that day, be sure about what you want to do, present yourself well, have a good conversation, and like do the case well.
Okay, so one thing that I would like to definitely emphasize on is that do believe in yourself. I mean, I started preparing really late because I did not believe in myself, and somewhere that did put me on a disadvantage. So I would say that trust in yourself, and once you have chosen consulting as a sector that you want to get a job in, please don't try to spread it out and try to prep for everything like ML and coding and APM and consulting as well. Just choose one or two, just one backup with consulting, so that you can focus on these two only.